In the depths of darkness, where light dares not enter, there dwell horrors beyond your wildest imagination. Every whisper, every shadow hides a story too terrifying to forget. Welcome to our haunted realm. Here, only the brave survive. Are you ready? Because tonight, fear will consume you. The wind howled through Salem village, rattling the wooden shutters of the Warren household. Abigail Warren pulled her woolen shawl tighter, her breath visible in the dim light of the hearth. The fire crackled, casting fleeting shadows on the rough-hewn walls, but it did little to warm the chill that had settled in her bones. Outside, the snow fell in heavy drifts, blanketing the fields and silencing the world. Inside, the silence was heavier still. Abigail's mother, goodwife Margaret Warren, knelt by the fire, stirring a pot of porridge with a wooden spoon. Her face was drawn, her lips pressed into a thin line. Abigail knew that look. Worry, unspoken but palpable. It had been there since the rumors began. Whispers of strange afflictions in Reverend Parris's household. Betty Parris, the minister's daughter, and her cousin Abigail Williams had fallen ill, writhing and screaming as if possessed. The village buzzed with speculation, and none of it was kind. Mother, Abigail said softly, breaking the quiet, do you think it's true, what they're saying about the girls? Margaret's spoon paused mid-stir, and she glanced at her daughter. Mind your tongue, Abigail. It's not our place to question such things. But they say it's witchcraft, Abigail pressed, her voice barely above a whisper. The word felt forbidden, sharp on her tongue. How can we know if it's real? Margaret set the spoon down and fixed Abigail with a stern gaze. We know what the Lord tells us. The devil is cunning, and we must be vigilant. Now, enough of this. Fetch the water before your father returns. Abigail nodded, though her mind churned with questions. She pulled on her cloak and stepped into the biting cold, the snow crunching beneath her boots. The well was a short walk from the house, but the village felt different now, as if the air itself carried suspicion. She passed the meeting house, its steeple looming against the grey sky, and shivered at the thought of the sermons Reverend Parris had delivered lately. Warnings of Satan's grip on their community. At the well, she found Tituba, the enslaved woman from Reverend Parris's household, drawing water. Tituba's dark eyes met Abigail's, and a faint smile curved her lips, though it didn't reach her eyes. Her hands, calloused and steady, worked the rope with practiced ease. Good morrow, Tituba, Abigail said, her voice hesitant. She had always liked Tituba, who told stories of warm islands and strange gods when no one else was listening. But now, with the village whispering of witchcraft, Abigail felt a pang of unease. Morrow, child, Tituba replied, her accent soft and lilting. Cold day, ain't it? Abigail nodded, lowering her bucket into the well. Tituba, is it true about Betty and Abigail Williams? They say you know things. Tituba's hands stilled, and for a moment she looked as if she might not answer. Then she sighed, her breath a fleeting cloud in the air. I know what I see, and I see fear. Them girls, they sick, but not with what folks think. Fear makes folks see devils where there ain't none. Abigail frowned, her curiosity piqued, but the fits, the screaming, what causes it, if not something evil? Tituba glanced around, ensuring they were alone, then leaned closer. Sometimes, child, the heart screams louder than the mouth. Them girls, they got burdens. So do we all. Before Abigail could ask more, a shout rang out from the path. Abigail Warren, step away from that woman. It was Goody Putnam, her face pinched with disapproval. She marched toward them, her cloak flapping like a crow's wings. You do well to mind who you speak to, girl. That one's trouble, mark my words. Tituba lowered her eyes, her expression unreadable, and turned back to her task. Abigail's cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she held her ground. We were only fetching water, Goody Putnam. Goody Putnam's eyes narrowed. Water, is it? I've heard tell of what she does in that house. Strange rituals, heathen ways. You'd best keep clear, lest you fall under her spell. Abigail wanted to protest, but the weight of Goody Putnam's gaze silenced her. The older woman huffed and strode off, leaving Abigail and Tituba alone again. The air felt heavier now, charged with unspoken accusations. Don't mind her, Tituba said quietly, hoisting her bucket. Folks like her, they see what they want to see. Abigail watched Tituba walk away, her figure disappearing into the snow. The words lingered, stirring something in Abigail's chest. A spark of doubt, fragile but persistent. She returned home, the bucket heavy in her hands, but her thoughts were heavier still. That night, as the family gathered for supper, the rumors took shape. Abigail's father, Goodman John Warren, spoke of a meeting at the meeting house. There, calling for an examination, he said, his voice grim. Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba. They say they've bewitched the girls. Abigail's heart sank. She thought of Tituba's weary smile, her cryptic words. Could she be guilty? The idea felt wrong, yet the village's fear was infectious, creeping into her thoughts like a shadow. Father, she ventured, what if they're wrong? What if it's not witchcraft? John's eyes darkened. Hold your tongue, Abigail. The magistrates will find the truth. We must trust in God's justice. But as Abigail lay in bed that night, the wind howling outside, she couldn't shake the feeling that justice was slipping away. The village was changing, and she feared what it would become. Chapter 2. The Examination, Salem Village, March 1692. The meeting house was packed, the air thick with the scent of damp wool and unwashed bodies. Abigail Warren squeezed onto a wooden bench near the back, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The room buzzed with murmurs, like a hive stirred to unrest. Men and women, their faces taut with fear or righteous zeal, craned their necks to see the front where three women stood accused: Tituba, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne. Abigail's heart pounded as she caught sight of Tituba, her head bowed, her hands bound with coarse rope. The magistrates, John Hathorne and Jonathan Corwin, sat at a heavy oak table, their black robes stark against the plain walls. Hathorne's eyes were sharp, his jaw set like a man who saw the devil in every shadow. Corwin, quieter, scribbled notes, his quill scratching against parchment. Reverend Parris stood nearby, his face flushed with a fervor Abigail had never seen before. His sermons had grown fiercer in recent weeks, each word a hammer striking fear into the congregation. Abigail's cousin, Mary Warren, sat a few rows ahead, her shoulders hunched. Mary, a servant in the Proctor household, had been drawn into the circle of afflicted girls, though she hadn't yet joined their cries of torment. Abigail had tried to speak with her that morning, but Mary had brushed her off, her eyes darting nervously. The distance between them stung, a reminder of how quickly the village was fracturing. The proceedings began with a prayer, Reverend Paris's voice booming through the room. Almighty God, guide us to root out the wickedness among us, that we may dwell in your light. The congregation murmured Amen, but Abigail's throat tightened. She glanced at Tituba, who stood motionless, her expression unreadable. How had it come to this? Just days ago, Tituba had been fetching water, speaking of fear and burdens. Now she was a prisoner, her fate in the hands of men who barely knew her. Hathorn's voice cut through the room. Tituba, you are charged with witchcraft, with afflicting Betty Paris and Abigail Williams by spectral means. What say you to these accusations? The crowd leaned forward, a collective intake of breath. Abigail's stomach twisted. She wanted Tituba to deny it, to stand tall and proclaim her innocence. But Tituba's shoulders sagged, and when she spoke, her voice was low, trembling. I am no witch, sir, she said. I love them girls. I never hurt them. Lies, a voice shouted. Abigail turned to see Ann Putnam Jr., one of the afflicted girls, standing with her mother. Ann's face was pale, her eyes wild. She came to me in the night, a black shape, pinching and choking me. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Abigail's hands clenched into fists. She remembered Ann Putnam's flair for dramatics, how she'd once wept over a lost ribbon, as if it were a tragedy. Could this be the same? But the crowd's reaction told her otherwise. Fear was a contagion, and Anne's words were its spark. Hathorn leaned forward, his voice cold. Tituba, the evidence is plain. The girls suffer, and you are named. Did you not make a pact with the devil? Speak the truth, or God's wrath will fall upon you. Tituba's eyes darted to Reverend Paris, then back to Hathorn. For a moment, Abigail thought she saw defiance flicker in her gaze, but it vanished as quickly as it came. I did no such thing, Tituba said, her voice breaking. But I seen things, sir. Others, they spoke of witches, of meetings in the woods. The crowd gasped again, louder this time. Abigail's breath caught. Was Tituba confessing, or was she trying to shift the blame? Hathorn pounced on her words. Others? Name them, woman. Who conspires with the devil in this village? Tituba hesitated, her lips trembling. Then, in a whisper that carried through the silent room, she said, Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne. They spoke of dark things. I heard them. Abigail's heart sank. Sarah Good, a beggar known for her sharp tongue, and Sarah Osborne, an ailing widow who rarely left her home, were easy targets. But Tituba's words felt like a betrayal, a desperate bid to save herself. The crowd roared with approval, their fear now directed. Women beside Tituba, who stood with varying degrees of defiance and despair. Sarah Good spat on the floor, her eyes blazing. I'm no witch, you fools! This is madness! Her outburst only fueled the crowd's fervor, and Hathorn ordered her silenced. Sarah Osborne, frail and trembling, said nothing, her silence damning in the eyes of the magistrates. As the examination continued, Abigail's gaze drifted to Mary Warren. cousin's hands were twisted in her apron, her face pale. Abigail wanted to run to her, to shake her, and ask why she hadn't spoken, why she hadn't defended Tituba. But the weight of the room, the magistrate's authority, the crowd's hysteria, kept her rooted to her seat. The afflicted girls, led by Ann Putnam Jr. and Abigail Williams, began to cry out, their bodies convulsing as if seized by invisible hands. "She torments me," Abigail Williams screamed, pointing at Tituba. "Her spirit presses my chest." The other girls echoed her, their voices a chilling chorus. Abigail Warren watched, horrified, as the room descended into chaos. The magistrates shouted for order, but the girls' cries drowned them out. In the midst of the uproar, Tituba's voice rose, desperate and clear. "I confess," she shouted, her words cutting through the noise. The room fell silent, all eyes on her. "I signed the devil's book. He came to me, a man in black, and bid me serve him. But I want to be free of him, sirs. I want God's mercy." Abigail's breath stopped. A confession. The word echoed in her mind, heavy with consequence. Hathorne's face lit with grim satisfaction, and he leaned back in his chair. "Tell us more, Tituba. Who else serves the devil? Name them all." Tituba's eyes were wide, her voice shaking as she spoke of spectral meetings, of witches flying through the night. She named Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne again, but no others. Abigail listened, her mind reeling. Was this true, or was Tituba saying what the magistrates wanted to hear? They twisted her words. What if they accused someone else? Someone like Goody Proctor? Mary flinched at the mention of her employer's wife. "Don't say such things. Goody Proctor is godly. No one would dare." Abigail wanted to argue, to make Mary see the danger, but her cousin turned and hurried away, disappearing into the snowy dusk. Alone in the emptying meeting house, Abigail felt the weight of what she'd witnessed. Tituba's confession had saved her from immediate punishment, but at what cost? The village was a tinderbox, and today's accusations were only the beginning. As she stepped outside, the cold bit at her face, and she pulled her cloak tighter. The snow had stopped, leaving the village eerily quiet. In the distance, she saw the flicker of lanterns as the accused were led away, their silhouettes small against the vast, unforgiving sky. Abigail's chest ached with a mix of fear and resolve. She didn't know how, but she couldn't stand by and watch her world unravel. That night, as she lay in bed, the memory of Tituba's confession haunted her. The Devil's Book. Witches in the woods. It sounded like a nightmare, yet the village believed it. Abigail closed her eyes, praying for clarity, but all she saw was the shadow of suspicion, creeping closer with each passing day. Chapter 3. The Widening Net Salem Village, March 1692. The air in Salem village had grown heavier, as if the weight of whispered accusations pressed down on every rooftop and field. Abigail Warren walked the path to the meeting house, her boots sinking into the muddy slush left by a brief thaw. The sky was a dull grey, promising more snow, and the village seemed to huddle beneath it, wary and watchful. In the week since Tituba, Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne had been sent to Boston's jail. The rumours had multiplied, each one sharper than the last. Names once spoken with respect now carried a taint, and Abigail felt the shift like a blade at her back. Today's gathering was not a formal examination, but a meeting called by Reverend Paris to address the growing unrest. Abigail's father had insisted she attend, though her mother had stayed home, claiming a headache. Abigail suspected it was fear, not illness, that kept Margaret Warren by the hearth. The meeting house loomed ahead, its steeple a stark silhouette against the clouds. As Abigail approached, she saw clusters of villagers outside, their voices low but urgent. She caught fragments of conversation, names like Rebecca Nurse and Martha Corey, women known for their piety, now whispered as suspects. Inside, the meeting house was already crowded, the benches filled with grim-faced men and women. Abigail slipped into a seat near the side, scanning the room for Mary Warren. Her cousin had avoided her since the examination, and Abigail's attempts to speak with her had been met with hurried excuses. She spotted Mary near the front, sitting with Ann Putnam Jr. and the other afflicted girls. Mary's face was pale, her hands fidgeting in her lap, and Abigail's chest tightened at the sight. What had happened to the cousin who once shared secrets under the stars? Was she truly convinced of the witch's guilt, or was she trapped like a bird in a snare? Reverend Paris stood at the pulpit, his hands gripping the edges as if to steady himself. His eyes swept the room, and Abigail felt a chill at their intensity. "Good people of Salem," he began, his voice resonant with authority, "we face a trial not only of law, but of spirit. The devil has set his sights on our village, sowing discord and wickedness. We must stand united, vigilant, and obedient to God's will." The congregation murmured agreement, but Abigail noticed unease in some faces. Goodman Proctor, who sat with his arms crossed, and Goody Nurse, whose serene expression seemed at odds with the tension around her. Abigail had always admired Rebecca Nurse, a woman of 70, whose kindness and faith were a quiet rebuke to the village's growing fear. The idea that her name was now tainted seemed unthinkable. Paris continued, his voice rising. "The afflicted among us, our daughters, our sisters, cry out in torment. Their suffering is a sign, a warning. We must root out the witches who plague them, no matter who they be." At this, Ann Putnam Jr. stood, her voice shrill. "I see them still. The spectres come at night, pressing my heart, bidding me join them." She swayed, and Mercy Lewis, another afflicted girl, caught her, their cries mingling in a practiced duet. The crowd gasped, some crossing themselves, others whispering prayers. Abigail's stomach churned. The girls' fits seemed too perfect, too timed, yet the room swallowed their performance whole. Mary Warren remained seated, her eyes fixed on the floor. Abigail willed her cousin to look up, to meet her gaze, but Mary seemed lost in her own world. Before Abigail could dwell on it, a new voice broke through the murmurs. Thomas Putnam, Anne's father, rising from his bench. Reverend Paris speaks true, Putnam said, his voice carrying the weight of a man accustomed to being heard. The devil's agents are among us, hiding in plain sight. I've heard tell of Martha Corey, who mocks the afflicted and questions God's justice. And Rebecca Nurse, her family's disputes have long troubled this village. Are these not signs of corruption? A hush fell over the room, broken by a soft gasp from Goody Nurse's daughter, who sat nearby. Abigail's breath caught. Thomas Putnam was a powerful man, his wealth and influence rivaled only by his ambition. She'd heard her father speak of Putnam's grudges, his eagerness to claim land from neighbors like the Nurses. Was this accusation born of faith or greed? Goodman Proctor stood, his voice steady but sharp. Thomas Putnam, you'd do well to guard your tongue. Goody Nurse is a woman of God, and Martha Corey has done no wrong. These accusations grow wilder by the day. Putnam's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, Anne Putnam Jr. cried out again, pointing at the air. I see Martha Corey's shape. She torments me now. The other girls echoed her, their voices a cacophony of fear. Abigail watched, horrified, as the room tilted toward chaos. Reverend Paris called for calm, but his words were drowned out by the girls' screams. In the midst of the uproar, Abigail's eyes locked with Mary Warren's. For a fleeting moment, Mary's expression was raw, unguarded. Fear, yes, but also shame. Then she looked away, joining the other girls in their cries. Abigail's heart sank. Mary was slipping further into the hysteria, and Abigail didn't know how to pull her back. The meeting ended with no formal accusations, but the damage was done. As the crowd spilled outside, Abigail overheard snippets of conversation. Martha, Corey's name, Rebecca Nurse's, even Elizabeth Proctor's spoken with suspicion. She lingered by the door, hoping to catch Mary, but her cousin vanished into the throng. Instead, Abigail found herself face to face with Thomas Putnam. He towered over her, his face a mask of false concern. Abigail Warren, he said, his voice smooth. You look troubled. These are dark times, are they not? Abigail nodded, wary. They are, sir, but I wonder if we're seeing clearly. Putnam's smile didn't reach his eyes. Clarity comes from faith, child. The afflicted girls speak truth. You do well to heed them and to watch your own steps. The words were a warning, thinly veiled. Abigail's skin prickled, but she held his gaze. I seek only the truth. Goodman Putnam, he chuckled, a sound devoid of warmth, and walked away. Abigail watched him go, her mind racing. Putnam's influence was a shadow over the village, and his daughter's accusations were too convenient. Could he be orchestrating this, using the girls to settle old scores? The thought was dangerous, but it took root, refusing to be ignored. During evening, Abigail sat by the hearth, her thoughts a tangle of fear and determination. Her father was at a neighbor's, discussing the day's events, and her mother was silent, her needle moving mechanically through a piece of mending. The fire's warmth did little to ease the chill in Abigail's bones. "Mother," she said at last, "do you think Goody Nurse could be a witch?" Margaret's needle paused, and she looked at Abigail with weary eyes. "I think fear makes monsters of us all, but we must trust the magistrates. To question them is to question God." Abigail wanted to argue, to say that God's justice wouldn't condemn the innocent, but she saw the exhaustion in her mother's face and held her tongue. Instead, she thought of Tituba, languishing in a Boston cell, and of Rebecca Nurse, whose name was now a whisper on the wind. The village was unraveling, and Abigail felt powerless to stop it. Later, as she lay in bed, the memory of Mary's fleeting glance haunted her. Her cousin was caught in the same web as the rest of Salem, but Abigail refused to believe she was lost. Tomorrow, she would find Mary, confront her, and demand answers. The truth was slipping away, but Abigail would chase it, no matter the cost. Outside, the wind howled, carrying the promise of a storm, and in the darkness, Salem's shadows grew longer. Chapter 4. Tangled Bonds, Salem Village, late March 1692. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting a pale light over Salem village, but it did little to lift the gloom that clung to the streets. Abigail Warren hurried along the path to the Proctor household, her cloak flapping in the brisk wind. Her breath came in short, determined bursts, her mind fixed on one goal: finding Mary Warren. The memory of her cousin's guilty glance at the meeting house had haunted Abigail through the night, fueling a resolve to break through Mary's silence. If she could reach her, perhaps she could unravel the truth behind the growing accusations. Tutsev, Proctor Farm was a sturdy, weathered structure, its fields stretching towards the horizon. Abigail's heart quickened as she approached the door, knowing Mary served as a maid here under John and Elizabeth Proctor. She knocked, her knuckles sharp against the wood, and waited. The door creaked open, revealing Goody Proctor, her face kind but strained. "Abigail Warren," Elizabeth said, her voice warm but cautious. "What brings you so early?" "I need to speak with Mary," Abigail said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's urgent." Elizabeth's eyes flickered with understanding, as if she sensed the weight of Abigail's purpose. "She's in the kitchen, but mind you, she's been unwell. The village's troubles weigh heavy on her." Abigail nodded, stepping inside. The house smelled of fresh bread and herbs, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. In the kitchen, Mary stood by a table, kneading dough with mechanical motions. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with shadows. She froze when she saw Abigail, her hands stilling. "Mary," Abigail said, closing the distance between them. "We need to talk. Now." Mary glanced toward the door, as if expecting someone to interrupt. "I'm busy, Abigail. Goody Proctor needs this bread. This can't wait." Abigail cut in, her voice low but firm. "I saw you at the meeting house. You know what's happening. Why won't you speak?" Mary's lips trembled, and she turned back to the dough, her movements jerky. "You don't understand. It's not that simple." "Then make it simple," Abigail pressed, stepping closer. "Tituba confessed, Mary. Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne are in chains. Now they're whispering about Rebecca Nurse. Rebecca Nurse. You know she's no witch. Why are you letting this happen?" Mary's hands clenched, flour dusting the air. I'm not letting anything happen, she snapped, her voice cracking. You think I want this? The girls, Anne, Mercy, Abigail, Williams, they see things, they feel things. If I don't go along, they'll turn on me. They'll say I'm one of them. Abigail's heart sank, but she didn't back down. So you're lying to save yourself? Mary, people could die. You have to tell the truth. Mary's eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. You don't know what it's like. They watch me, Abigail. Ann Putnam Jr. especially. She says the devil's book is real, that she's seen it. If I speak against them, they'll say I signed it too. Abigail grabbed Mary's arm, forcing her to meet her gaze. Listen to me. You're my cousin. I know you. You're not cruel, not like them. If you stay silent, more will suffer. What about Goody Proctor? Her name's been whispered too. Would you let them take her? Mary yanked her arm free, her face twisting with fear. Don't say that. Goody Proctor's been good to me. She's no witch. Then fight for her, Abigail urged. Fight for the truth. I'll stand with you. For a moment, Mary seemed to waver, her eyes searching Abigail's face. But then her shoulders slumped and she turned away. I can't. I'm sorry, Abigail. I just can't. The defeat in Mary's voice was a knife to Abigail's chest. She wanted to shake her, to scream, but the weight of Mary's fear was palpable. Before she could say more, Elizabeth Proctor appeared in the doorway, her expression gentle but firm. Abigail, it's best you go, Elizabeth said. Mary has work to finish, and these matters, they're not for us to settle. Abigail nodded, though her throat tightened. She cast one last look at Mary, who refused to meet her eyes, and left the house. The cold air stung her face as she stepped outside, but it was nothing compared to the ache in her heart. Mary was slipping away. Caught in a current, Abigail couldn't fight alone. The village was abuzz when Abigail reached the center, drawn by the sound of raised voices. A crowd had gathered outside the meeting house, where a constable stood with a warrant in hand. Abigail's pulse quickened as she pushed through the throng, catching sight of Rebecca Nurse being led from her home across the way. The old woman's face was calm, her hands clasped as if in prayer, but her daughter Sarah wept openly, clinging to her mother's arm. What's happening? Abigail asked a nearby woman, Goody Cloyce. They've arrested Goody Nurse, Goody Cloyce whispered, her voice trembling, on charges of witchcraft. Ann Putnam Jr. and the girls named her in court this morning. Abigail's stomach lurched. It was real then. The whispers had become chains. She watched as Rebecca was guided toward a cart, her dignity unshaken despite the crowd's murmurs. Some called out blessings, others curses, and Abigail felt the village splitting like dry wood. As the cart rattled away, Abigail's eyes caught a familiar figure. Thomas Putnam, standing near the meeting house steps. His face was somber, but there was a glint in his eyes, a satisfaction that made Abigail's skin crawl. She remembered his words at the last meeting, his quickness to name Rebecca Nurse and Martha Corey. The Nurses and Putnams had clashed over land for years, and now Rebecca was in chains. Was this justice or something darker? Abigail's thoughts were interrupted by a shout. Ann Putnam Jr. emerged from the crowd, her face flushed with fervor. "The Lord reveals the wicked," she cried, pointing after the cart. Goody nurses, spectre tormented me, but God's truth prevails. The crowd roared, some cheering, others shrinking back. Abigail's hands clenched into fists. Anne's performance was a spark in a dry field, and the village was ready to burn. She wanted to shout, to call out the lie, but the crowd's fervor held her back. One wrong word, and she could be next. That evening, Abigail sat by the fire, her mind racing. Her father had returned from the fields, his face grim as he recounted the day's events. "They say Goody Nurse bewitched the Putnam children," he said, shaking his head. "I never thought to see such a day." Abigail's mother was silent, her needle moving faster than usual. Abigail wanted to tell them about Mary, about Putnam's scheming, but fear stopped her. What proof did she have? Only suspicions, fragile as cobwebs. As night fell, Abigail lay awake, the wind rattling the shutters. The village was a trap, closing tighter with each accusation. She thought of Rebecca Nurse, alone in a cell, and of Mary, lost to fear. The truth was out there, but it was buried under lies and greed. Abigail didn't know how to find it, but she knew she had to try before the flames consumed them all. Chapter 5. Whispers in the dark Salem village, early April 1692. The dawn broke cold and grey over Salem village, the air sharp with the promise of spring, yet heavy with the weight of fear. Abigail Warren stood at the edge of her family's field, her cloak pulled tight against the morning chill. The world felt unsteady, as if the ground itself might crack under the strain of the village's suspicions. Rebecca Nurse's arrest had shaken Abigail to her core, and the whispers of new accusations against Martha Corey, a woman known for her sharp wit and steadfast faith, gnawed at her resolve. She couldn't shake the image of Thomas Putnam's satisfied glint, his words at the meeting house echoing like a warning. If he was orchestrating this chaos, she needed proof, no matter the risk. Abigail's confrontation with Mary Warren had left her raw. Her cousin's fear, a mirror of the village's own. Mary's refusal to act had driven a wedge between them. But Abigail couldn't abandon her. Not yet. She turned from the field, her boots crunching on the frost-kissed grass, and set out for the village centre. Her plan was reckless, to linger near Thomas Putnam's home, hoping to overhear something that might confirm her suspicions. It was dangerous, but inaction was a heavier burden. The Putnam house stood on a rise, its windows dark and unwelcoming. Abigail kept to the shadows of a nearby copse, her heart pounding as she scanned the yard. The village was quieter now, its people wary of gathering in groups lest they draw suspicion. She crouched low, her breath shallow, and waited. The minutes stretched, each one a test of her nerve. Just as she began to doubt her plan, voices drifted from the house, a low, urgent murmur. Abigail edged closer, careful to avoid the crunch of twigs. Through a gap in the shutter, she saw Thomas Putnam standing in his parlour, his back to the window. Across from him was his wife, Anne Putnam Sr., her face drawn and anxious. A third figure, half hidden in shadow, leaned forward. A man Abigail recognized as Joseph Putnam, Thomas's half-brother, known for his quieter demeanor. "You push too far, Thomas," Joseph said, his voice tight with frustration. Rebecca, nurse, Martha Corey, the village will turn against us if you keep this up. Thomas's laugh was sharp, cutting through the air. The village will do as I guide it, Joseph. The girls speak and the magistrates listen. Land power, it's all within reach. The nurse's fields, the Corey plot, ours if we play this right. Anne Senior wrung her hands, her voice barely audible. But the girls? Anne Junior cries out in her sleep. What if it's not God's work? Thomas rounded on her, his eyes flashing. It's God's work if I say it is. The devil's spectres are real enough to them. Keep Anne in line, and we'll have what's owed us. Abigail's blood ran cold. It was true then. Thomas Putnam was using the accusations to settle scores and seize land. Her hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the weight of what she'd heard. Proof at last, but what could she do with it? To accuse a man like Putnam without ironclad evidence was to invite ruin. She backed away, her mind racing, and slipped into the woods, her heart a drumbeat in her chest. By midday, the village was abuzz with news. Martha Corey had been arrested. Abigail joined the crowd outside the meeting house, her stomach churning as she saw Goody Corey led forward, her head high despite the chains on her wrists. Martha's husband, Giles, followed, his face a mask of fury and grief. The crowd was divided. Some shouted curses, others whispered prayers. But the afflicted girls were there. As always, their cries a chilling refrain. Anne Putnam Jr. led the chorus, her voice piercing. Martha Corey's spectre stabs me. She bids me sign the devil's book. Mercy Lewis and Abigail Williams echoed her, their bodies twisting in feigned torment. Abigail's eyes sought Mary Warren, who stood at the edge of the group, her face pale and her hands clenched. Mary's gaze flickered to Abigail, then away, as if the weight of their last conversation still lingered. The magistrates, Hathorne and Corwin, presided from the meeting house steps, their faces stern. Hathorne's voice boomed over the crowd. Martha Corey, you stand accused of witchcraft, of tormenting these girls by spectral means. What say you? Martha's eyes were steady, her voice clear. I am innocent, sir. I know not of witches or spectres. These charges are falsehoods, born of malice. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others hissing. Abigail's heart ached for Martha, whose defiance was a beacon in the chaos. But Hathorne leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. You mock the afflicted, Goody Corey. You question their visions. Is this not the work of one who consorts with the devil? Martha's laugh was sharp, almost reckless. If questioning madness makes me a witch, then half this village should be in chains. The crowd gasped, and Abigail's breath caught. Martha's boldness was admirable but dangerous. Hathorne's face darkened, and he ordered her taken to jail, pending examination. As Martha was led away, Giles shouted after her, his voice breaking, "You'll not take her from me, you hear?" Abigail watched helpless as the cart rattled off. The crowd dispersed, but the air was thick with tension. She lingered, her white-eared young thoughts a tangle of fear and resolve. Thomas Putnam's words echoed in her mind. Land, power, the nurse's fields. She needed to act, but how? The magistrates were blind to anything but the girl's cries, and the village was too scared to listen. That evening, Abigail sat by the hearth, her hands idle for once. Her Her father was at a neighbor's, discussing the arrests, and her mother worked silently, her needle flashing in the firelight. The weight of what Abigail had overheard pressed against her, a secret too heavy to carry alone. She thought of Mary, of Martha Corey, of Rebecca Nurse, all caught in a web spun by greed and fear. "Mother," Abigail said at last, her voice low, "what if the accusations aren't true? What if someone's using them for gain?" Margaret's needle paused, her eyes sharp. "Mind your words, Abigail. Such talk is dangerous." "But it's happening," Abigail pressed, her voice trembling. "Good people, like Goody Nurse and Goody Corey, are suffering. What if it's not the devil, but men?" Margaret set her mending down, her face pale. "If that's true, it's a matter for God and the magistrates, not for us. You'd risk your life and ours to speak such things." Abigail's throat tightened. Her mother was right. The risk was immense, but so was the cost of silence. She thought of Giles Corey's anguished cry, of Mary's haunted eyes. The truth was afire, and she couldn't let it burn out. As night fell, Abigail lay awake, the wind howling outside. She saw Thomas Putnam's face, his cold ambition, and Martha Corey's defiance. The village was a powder keg, and she held a spark. Tomorrow she would seek out Giles Corey, share what she'd heard, and see if he'd stand with her. It was a desperate plan, but desperation was all she had left. Chapter 6. The Trials Edge Salem Village. April 1692, the meeting house loomed, like a sentinel over Salem Village, its walls steeped in the echoes of accusations. Abigail Warren stood outside, her heart a frantic drumbeat as she scanned the crowd for Giles Corey. The air was thick with the scent of spring mud and fear, the village teetering on the brink of chaos. Martha Corey's examination was set to begin, and the whispers of new arrests, Dorothy Good, a mere child of 4, and Sarah Cloyce, Rebecca Nurse's sister, had set Abigail's nerves alight. Thomas Putnam's words, overheard in the dark, burned in her mind. Land, power, it's all within reach. She had to act, and Giles Corey, with his fierce loyalty to his wife, was her only hope. Abigail spotted Giles near the meeting house steps, his weathered face set in a scowl. His broad shoulders were hunched, as if bearing the weight of Martha's chains. She approached cautiously, her boots sinking into the damp earth. The crowd buzzed around them, some casting wary glances, others too absorbed in their own fears to notice. "Goodman Corey," Abigail said, her voice low but steady. "May I speak with you alone?" Giles's eyes narrowed, but he nodded, stepping away from the crowd. They moved to the shadow of a nearby oak, its bare branches clawing at the sky. Abigail's pulse raced, her words tumbling out before she could lose her nerve. "I heard something," she said, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard, "about Thomas Putnam. He spoke of using the accusations to take land. The nurse's fields, your wife's plot. He's pushing the girls, Anne especially, to name his enemies." Giles's face darkened, his hands clenching into fists. "Putnam!" he spat, the name a curse. "I've long suspected his greed. The man's a viper, cloaked in piety. But proof, girl, what proof have you?" Abigail hesitated, her certainty faltering. I overheard him with his wife and brother. He admitted it, but it's only my word. No one else heard. Giles's eyes bored into hers, searching for truth. Your word against a man like Putnam. That's a dangerous path, Abigail Warren. The magistrates eat from his hand, and the village is too scared to listen. I know, Abigail said, her voice trembling. But Martha's in chains, and Rebecca nurse, and now a child. If we don't act, who will? Giles rubbed his jaw, his gaze distant. I'll not let Martha hang for Putnam's lives. But we need more than whispers. Find me proof, documents, witnesses, something solid. Then we'll see. Abigail nodded, though her stomach twisted. Proof was a needle in a haystack, and time was slipping away. Before she could say more, the meeting house doors swung open, and the crowd surged forward. Martha Corey's examination was beginning. Inside, the meeting house was a cauldron of tension. Abigail squeezed onto a bench near the back, her eyes fixed on Martha Corey, who stood before the magistrates, her hands bound. John Hathorne and Jonathan Corwin sat at their table, their faces stern, while Reverend Parris hovered nearby, his expression a mix of zeal and unease. The afflicted girls, Anne Putnam Jr., Mercy Lewis, Abigail Williams, and Mary Warren, sat in the front row, their faces pale and their eyes darting. Hathorne's voice cut through the murmurs. Martha Corey, you are charged with witchcraft, with afflicting these girls by spectral means. What say you to these accusations? Martha's chin lifted, her voice steady despite the chains. I am no witch, sir. I serve God, not the devil. These charges are born of malice and falsehood. The crowd whispered, some nodding, others hissing. Abigail's heart swelled with admiration for Martha's courage, but she knew it would not sway Hathorne. Chapter 7. Into the Lion's Den. The moon hung low over Salem village, a sliver of silver in a sky thick with clouds. Abigail Warren crouched in the shadows of the Putnam house, her breath shallow and her heart pounding like a drum. The night was cold, the air sharp with the scent of damp earth and pine, but sweat beaded on her forehead. She had never done anything so reckless, yet the weight of Giles Corey's challenge, find me proof, drove her forward. Thomas Putnam's words, overheard, days ago were afire in her chest. The nurses' fields, the Corey platoons. If she could find evidence, a letter, a ledger, anything, she might expose his schemes and save the innocent. The Putnam house was quiet, its windows dark, save for a faint glow from the parlour. Abigail had watched the family earlier, noting that Thomas and Anne Putnam Sr. had gone to a neighbour's, leaving only a servant and Anne Putnam Jr. at home. The risk was immense, but so was the cost of inaction. Rebecca Nurse, Martha Corey, and now whispers of Elizabeth Proctor's name. The village was unravelling, and Abigail couldn't stand by. She crept to the back door, her fingers trembling as she tested the latch. It was unlocked, a stroke of luck that felt like a trap. She slipped inside, the floorboards creaking under her weight. The kitchen was dim, lit only by the embers of a dying fire. Abigail paused, listening for footsteps, but the house was silent. She moved toward the parlour, where Thomas conducted his business, her eyes scanning for a desk or chest. In the parlour, a A single candle flickered on a table, casting long shadows across the room. A heavy oak desk stood against the wall, its surface cluttered with papers and quills. Abigail's pulse raced as she approached, her hands shaking as she rifled through the documents. Land deeds, tax records, letters, nothing incriminating at first glance. She opened a drawer, her fingers brushing against a leather-bound ledger. She flipped it open, her eyes scanning the neat rows of numbers and names. Nurse, Corey, Cloyce. Beside each was a notation acres, values and dates, some marked pending. Her breath caught. This was it proof of Putnam's greed, his plan to seize land through the accusations. She tucked the ledger under her cloak, her mind racing with plans to show it to Giles. But as she turned to leave, a floorboard creaked behind her. "Who's there?" a voice hissed. Anne Putnam Jr. stood in the doorway, her nightgown ghostly. In the candlelight, her eyes wide with shock. Abigail froze, her heart in her throat. "Anne, it's me, Abigail Warren. I was looking for you." Anne's eyes narrowed, suspicion replacing surprise. "In my father's parlor. At night? What are you doing, Abigail?" "I heard you were unwell." Abigail lied, her voice trembling. "I came to check on you." Anne stepped closer, her gaze flicking to the desk. "You're lying. You're after something. Are you a witch, come to torment me?" The accusation was a blade, sharp and sudden. Abigail's mind raced for a way out. "No, Anne, I swear it. I'm your friend. I only wanted to help." Anne's lips curled, her voice low. "Friends don't sneak in the dark." "I'll scream, Abigail. I'll say your spectre plagues me." Panic surged, but Abigail held her ground. "And what will your father say when he knows you let me in? He'll ask why you didn't call out sooner." Anne hesitated, her bravado faltering. For a moment, Abigail saw the girl beneath the accuser, young, scared, caught in a web she didn't fully understand. But the moment passed, and Anne's eyes hardened. "Get out," she hissed, "and pray I don't name you tomorrow." Abigail didn't wait for another chance. She slipped past Anne, clutching the ledger, and fled into the night. The cold air stung her lungs as she ran, the Putnam house fading into the darkness. She didn't stop until she reached the edge of her family's field, where she hid the ledger beneath a loose floorboard in the barn. It was a small victory, but it came at a Costan's threat, hung over her like a storm cloud. The next morning, the village was rocked by news. Elizabeth Proctor had been arrested. Abigail joined the crowd outside the meeting house, her stomach churning as she saw Goody Proctor led forward, her face calm but pale. John Proctor followed, his eyes blazing with fury, his voice raised in protest. The afflicted girls were there, their cries a familiar chorus. But Abigail's eyes sought Mary Warren, who stood at the edge of the group, her face ashen. Amy Putnam Jr. led the accusations, her voice piercing. "Elizabeth Proctor's spectre chokes me. She bids me serve the devil." Mercy Lewis and Abigail Williams echoed her, but Mary's voice was barely audible, her eyes fixed on the ground. Abigail's heart leapt. Mary was faltering, her guilt a crack in the girls' united front. Hathorne's voice boomed. "Elizabeth Proctor, you are charged with witchcraft. What say you?" Elizabeth's voice was steady, her eyes meeting Hathorne's. "I am innocent, sir. I know no witchcraft. These charges are false. The crowd murmured, some with sympathy, others with scorn. Abigail's hands clenched. The ledger's weight a secret she couldn't yet share. She needed Giles Corey's help, but he was nowhere in sight, likely at Martha's side in Boston. As Elizabeth was led to a cart, John Proctor's voice rang out. "This is madness! You'll not take my wife on the word of children!" The constable restrained him, and Abigail's heart ached. The Proctors were respected. Their arrest a sign the trial spared no one. That afternoon, Abigail found Mary Warren by the village well, her hands trembling as she drew water. The crowd had dispersed, leaving them alone, and Abigail seized her chance. "Mary," she said, stepping close, "you know this is wrong. Elizabeth Proctor's no witch. You can stop this." Mary's eyes filled with tears, her voice a whisper. "I tried, Abigail. I told Anne I couldn't do it anymore, but she threatened me. She said they'd name me next." "Then fight back," Abigail urged, her voice fierce. "I have proof, Mary proof, Thomas Putnam's using the accusations for land. If you speak, we can end this." Mary's eyes widened, hope flickering, but fear quickly smothered it. "Proof against Goodman Putnam? They'll never believe us, and if Anne finds out—" "She won't," Abigail said, gripping Mary's arm. "But we need you, Mary. Elizabeth needs you. Please." Mary hesitated, her breath hitching. I'll think on it. But don't ask me now, Abigail. I need time." Abigail nodded, though her heart sank. Time was a luxury they didn't have. As Mary hurried away, Abigail felt the ledger's weight, a promise and a burden. She had to find Giles, show him the evidence, and pray it was enough.